Welcome everyone to our session today about the launch of HMRC's additional information form coming 1st of August 2023. We did speak about this back in March, but we felt it would be useful to go over some of the points again, given we are T-minus 2 weeks out, and there still does seem to be some confusion when talking to prospects and clients about what's required, what claims are affected, that sort of thing. So Jen's going to be taking us through today what you need to know and how to start getting ready. So come August, there are no surprises from what type of account you need, what new information you need to supply, the implications for not being aware of the new submission process, and we'll also be talking about how WhisperClaims are supporting our own customers. The overriding message that we want to get out today is don't panic. Don't panic. So as we go through the session today, don't forget to please fire over any questions you have. We will be sharing resources and contact information in the chat box. So please do use the Q&A box if you possibly can to ask any questions. There is a lot to get through today, so handing over to Jen, and I'll be back a bit later on.
Cool, thanks, Suze. So as Sue says, we've spoken about this, I think, 3 or 4 times through this year, but obviously it's so important that everyone understands this that we thought we'll just keep banging the drum until we've managed to get the message through to everyone. So what we're going to cover today is what's actually coming, the steps you need to take as advisors and accountants to be ready for those changes, and then we'll go through actually what the additional information form is and what information you need to be able to fill it out. So, pardon me. So the big change is that from the 1st of August, all claims, so no matter the date of the claim periods, anything like that, any claim submitted has to be accompanied by an additional information form. It's an online form and it has to be submitted ahead of the CT600. So you need to fill this form out, submit it to HMRC, and then include the numbers in the CT600 and submit that. And basically what HMRC have said is any claims, so any numbers included in CT600 that haven't got an associated form, HMRC will see that as invalid and they'll just remove that from the CT600 when it's being processed. There's some points that we haven't had clarified yet. HMRC are having one of their R&D consultative forum meetings next week, and we'll hopefully get some clarity on this. But one of the things we don't know yet is what the process would be if you submit a claim without a form and it gets rejected. We're assuming you'd be able to just then resubmit an amended CT600 that has been accompanied by a form. But we're not got clarity on that yet. But the key point is that this is all claims, regardless of when they're prepared, what the claim period was, anything like that, they have to be accompanied by a form from the 1st of August. So, what do you need to do? So first things first, you need to make sure you can access the form and submit it on behalf of your clients. So you will need an agent services account with HMRC. We've heard a little bit of chatter about this being quite difficult to do. Some people are finding there's delays in it. I did see one of our users advise someone else to just keep trying all the different agent services credentials they've got with the portal to see if they've got one that works. HMRC are being a little bit ambiguous on this. So if you've got one for PAYE, one for VAT, whichever it is, just keep trying. And if you haven't registered as an agent with HMRC yet, you need to do that as soon as possible to be able to do this, because if you log in, I can log in just using the credentials of WhisperClaims. All I can do is submit a claim for WhisperClaims. I can't do anything else. So if you haven't got an agent services account, you will not be able to submit additional information forms for anyone else. So on behalf of your clients. But yeah, it's all done through Government Gateway. There's links in all the materials that Suze will be linking to. So getting to it is quite simple, but making sure you've got the right credentials to actually submit things on behalf of others is really important. The other thing you need to do, obviously, is familiarize yourself with the form. So even if you haven't got that agent services account yet, you can access it, as I say, using your own company's Government Gateway ID. And I would recommend everybody going in and just walking through the form step by step with dummy information, just to get the feel of it, to work out the order that things are coming in and see what information they're actually asking for, kind of thinking about how this is going to have to change your processes and the way that you gather information. So there's a lot in it that any reputable advisor will have been gathering already. And then but the way that they want it expressed or calculated is a little bit different to anything they've asked for before. So getting used to it, getting familiar with it really, really important. And off the back of that, as I say, you need to then review your claim preparation process. So the absolute key difference in this is that HMRC are mandating how many projects need to be described in detail. So obviously up till now, they haven't mandated any information at all, and they haven't really cared about how many of the projects that are being claimed are described in detail. So they're mandating an exact number. It's to do with the number of projects that are being included in the claim and the amount of the cost associated with each project. So they want to see at least 50% of the costs or the projects that associated with at least 50% of the costs being described in detail. The costs also need to be gathered under defined categories. So the categories you'd expect, but the total needs to be divided between all projects. So where you might previously have calculated that in the background, but then submitted one number to HMRC, they now want it split across all the projects. And they also want the costs to be split into, if it's a mixed claim, the amount of staff costs, for example, under SME and the amount of staff costs under RDEC, which is quite a different way than I think most people have worked before. Other key points about it that will affect your process. So the form has to be submitted within 28 days or it is wiped as far as we can tell. So if you start a claim, maybe fill in 5 or 6 projects, go away because you need more information from your client and come back, there's a chance that the form will have been deleted and you've lost everything, which is annoying, but also means you probably need some way of gathering this offline and then adding it to the form rather than using the form as the only place to deposit that information, because there's a chance it will go. As far as we can tell at the moment, the form can't be viewed or deleted after submission. So that I should say edited, not deleted. So it definitely can't be edited. We don't know if you'll be able to view it yet. They recommend that you download a PDF version of it, but essentially once it's gone, and there's nothing you can do. The information they've given out does say that if you need to make changes, you need to fill out a whole new form and resubmit that. And there's no way easily to copy and paste from the previous one unless you've downloaded the PDF. And the other point is that you have to do one form for each corporation tax period. So for each CT600, you need one form. So if you've got an 18-month accounting period, you potentially will need 2 forms for each corporation tax period. So there's a few sort of tweaks, some bigger changes, but you need to be thinking about how you're going to absorb this into your processes and make sure you're doing everything you need to do. The other thing, and I'm going to bang on about this a lot, is the additional information form has to be submitted ahead of the CT600. So if you're looking at your submission process, you need to make sure that you're not only getting sign off from your client, writing up everything, but that you're making sure you're submitting that, clicking that button before you click the button on the CT600. And you also need to ensure that box 657 on the CT600, this is a new box that just says, I have submitted an additional information form. Make sure that's checked. Obviously, we've seen in the past where people have put in costs of R&D, but have forgotten to tick particular boxes and HMRC has rejected the claim. So you need to be making sure that you're ticking literally all the right boxes all the way through to CT600 and that you're submitting things in the right order. So there's quite a lot to do in terms of claim preparation, talking to your client, and the submission process that will need to be tweaked to make sure you get everything you need. Can you avoid it? No, not at all. All claims submitted after 1st August 2023 have to be accompanied by an additional information form. There's nothing you could do. Obviously, you've got 2 weeks now to submit any claims you've currently got in progress. So anything that can be submitted up until the end of July, you're absolutely fine. You don't need to use a form. You can if you want to. It's there, it's live, it's ready. But obviously, we'd recommend getting in any claims you can before the end of July, just to make sure you're not. I think HMRC have done a fairly good job with this form, but who knows how it's going to work when people start using it in anger come 1st of August. So getting in ahead of that is probably a really good idea. But come the 1st of August, there's just no way to avoid this. So having talked about kind of the things you need to do to your processes, let's talk about actually the form. So it's in 4 sections. 3 of them are fairly simple and 1 is really, really extensive. So first section is just business details. So you need business name, the UTR, the PAYE reference if you've got one, VAT reference if they've got one, and the SIC code for the company. Obviously, acting as the advisor, you should have all this information. The SIC code is an interesting one, purely because you have to enter that. So there's no at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any integration between the form and, for example, Companies House. So we would obviously advise putting in the same SIC code as in Companies House. It seems odd that they've made that choice because the HMRC are definitely focusing on looking at, for example, claims from sectors you wouldn't expect to find R&D. And I'd assume this is an extension of that, of being able to just check really quickly that the SIC would make sense for an R&D claim. But they're not forcing you to put in the correct SIC code. So odd choice in their part. We would definitely recommend putting in the correct SIC code. But in general, that's the simplest of the sections. Section 2 is contact and agent details for the form and the claim itself. So, so for all agents and advisors, so essentially it goes through and it asks you whether you're an agent, whether you're an R&D advisor. So if there has been the accountant for the company that's submitting the CT600 will always have to fill in their details. Also, any R&D advisors over and above that will need to have their details as well. So you need to be able to provide the name, the business name, phone number, email address, and business address of all of those agents and advisors. So anyone that has touched the claim at any point in its life cycle, you need to provide those details. And then obviously, one of the things that HMRC has been talking about for a while in terms of kind of reducing fraud is making sure that the claim is signed off by a senior officer at the claimant company. So for them, all you need is name, role, phone number, and email address. There's an assumption that we have, again, it's not been clarified yet, that if a form is prepared by an agent and sent to HMRC, there will be some way that the senior officer gets an email, has to sign off on it. But we haven't had sight of that yet. But you do need to provide all of these details. Section 3 is actually super simple. All it asks for is the start date of the corporation tax period, the end date of the corporation tax period, and whether this is part of a longer period of account. So as I mentioned before, if you've got an extended accounting period, you will have to fill in one form for each corporation tax period within that. They don't ask for huge numbers of details on this, which I find slightly odd again, in terms of matching up. If you've got someone that's submitting an 18-month period of account, 2 corporation tax returns and 2 forms, it's quite a lot to try and coordinate at their end. But at the moment, all it asks for is the start and end date, and whether it's it's part of a longer period of account. So, sorry, my slide doesn't want to move. Section 4 is much, much bigger and more complicated than any of the first 3. So the first 3 are basically housekeeping details. Section 4 is very, very long and covers the qualifying expenditure and projects. So the first part, you're taking through a first section, asks which scheme is being claimed through. So you already need to know whether you're claiming through SME, RDEC, or both. They ask for which cost categories are being claimed in each scheme and the total qualifying expenditure for each. So it will say under SME, did you have staff costs, raw materials, subcontractors, EPWs, and you select those from a list, and then it asks what the total qualifying expenditure for each is. And then for both SME and RDEC, it asks how much of this qualifying expenditure is the result of qualifying indirect activities. So this is a very new thing that I've never seen HMRC ask before. So you need to think about how much time is spent on sort of direct at the coalface R&D, and how much was those qualifying indirect activities that you can claim for, like staff training or writing up papers or whatever it was that counts as a qualifying indirect activity. And there is a link from the form to the list of things that qualify there. So they need to have a think about, again, probably before you get to the form, how much is qualifying indirect and how much is qualifying direct activities. So once you've filled that part out, so that breakdown of the overall cost, it then asks how many projects are you being claimed for. It asks for detailed descriptions of a subset of these projects and the SME and RDEC expenditure totals for each of this subset of projects. So again, you might have some projects themselves that are just SME, some that are just RDEC, some that are mixed, and it wants those totals for each one that you're describing in detail. The number of projects you have to describe depends on the overall number of projects being claimed for and the portion of the cost for each of those projects. So if a company has done 3 or fewer projects, then all of them will have to be described. So if they've only done 2, they have to describe both. If they've done 3, they have to describe all 3. Once you get above 3, they want to see 50% of the cost. So you have to do a minimum of 3. If you had 4 and the 3 of them cover 50%, then you still only have to do 3. However, if each of them is only 10%, you're going to have to keep adding more and more till you get to that 50%. The maximum they'll ask for a description of is 10, which we've had some comments from some of the people we've demoed what we've been doing to, saying that that's actually quite a small number of projects. If you're working with a large company, they've got 60 or 70 eligible projects, 10 is actually quite a small number. And I absolutely agree. And it might only cover 10 to 15% of the costs, but this is what HMRC have decided for now. So the way that this is, the user experience in this in the form is a wee bit clunky to my view, but basically you just have to keep adding projects until it's satisfied that you've put in enough projects to cover the amount of cost, and that's all kind of calculated in the background based on the SME and RDIC totals that you've put in for each project and the ones you entered earlier that gave an overall amount per scheme. So you need to know how many projects you're describing and also know the expenditure totals for each project before you start filling out the form. The actual description of projects, again, is very, very detailed. You have a ridiculous number of characters to play with for this. You can write 5 sides of A4 per section if you want to, something like that. It's a huge amount. But the main things they want to know is the main area of science and technology. So you just need to be able to say this was mechanical engineering, this was software engineering, this was biotechnology. They want to know that. They want a baseline. So they want to know what scientific or technological knowledge existed at the start of the project. So you need to be thinking about what were the limitations of that particular technology at the start of the project? Why couldn't it just have been used the way it was? Why did it have to be advanced? They want to know about the advance in scientific or technological knowledge sought. So what change did the company have to make to the underlying science or technology to achieve the outcome that they wanted? They also want to know about the scientific or technological uncertainties faced. So what about the project was difficult? Why couldn't they just, again, have sat down with a pencil and a piece of paper and worked it out in the course of half an hour? What made it difficult? What were the challenges that they faced along the way? And they also want to know about how they sought to overcome the uncertainty. So what process did they take? What experiments did they do? What trials did they run? What prototypes did they build? All that kind of thing. So for each of these, we would recommend that you keep it to probably fewer than 500 words per section, because if you're writing up a lot of projects, that's still a huge amount of text. But as I say, there is a limit, but I wouldn't imagine anyone's ever going to hit that limit unless they're, I don't know, copying and pasting from a grant application. So there's a huge, you can write as much as you want, but you probably don't want to go too far. So that's essentially the form. I can see we've already got quite a lot of questions, but that's the basics of the form. So I'm going to hand over to Sue to talk about kind of what we're doing at WhisperClaims to make this easier for our users.
Thank you, Jen. That's awesome. So I'm sure there's a few deep breaths in the audience, and it is a lot. It's a lot to take in, particularly from a time and efficiency sort of point of view and perspective. So some good news. We have created a downloadable guide to reiterate the information that's been shared today, and you can access that. I'm just going to pop that actually in the chat box for you all now, using the link that I am just about to share there for you. And I suppose it's fair to say that we recognise that some accountants may feel like they want to potentially walk away from this type of work moving forward because they feel overwhelmed by the additional complexities, coupled with rate changes and the reduced cost effectiveness of providing an R&D tax service. What's important to remember is that these protocols are part of HMRC's wider commitment to reducing fraud and error within the scheme. So it is all being done for the right reasons, and it's important to keep your clients safely away from providers who may not be taking as good care of them as you will. So as I said right at the start, our overriding message for today is don't let this put you off. You're already doing the work when it comes to assessing your client's projects for eligibility. You now need to spend some additional time working with your clients to write up the additional projects for the additional information form. I'm really sorry, that's my emails just banging away. I think there's some guides being downloaded, so I'll just switch that off, sorry. Spend some additional time with your clients to make sure that you're gathering all of the project information that's required for the additional information form. And some additional good news is that WhisperClaims has a solution to make the completion of the AIF as pain-free and seamless as possible. So The big changes that are being mandated, as Jen's already said, are the specified number of projects proportional to how many are being claimed for. Within the WhisperClaims app, we will shortly be including additional questions to help you work out in advance how many projects will need to be prepared and written up prior to filling out the additional information form, which is obviously very handy because the last thing you want to have to do mid-form filling is go back to your customer to get additional project information from them. And the other thing is that costs are needed to be declared per project, and we're adapting the way that costs are gathered within the app to ensure that for our customers, all of the information that they're gathering as they move through their journey will be consolidated at the end of the process, ready for the additional information form. HMRC have already said, and this could change in the future, but at the moment they will not be offering any integrations or APIs. So along with the report that our customers already get, a PDF and a Word version format, we will soon be introducing a new output in Word format that is going to be mapping the fields for the additional information form, making the whole process of filling out the form super simple. And it means that you have the ability to simply copy and paste over the information that is being output, and it also means that you will have a black and white sort of document available in your dashboard should you need to refer to it at a later date. So overall, again, how can WhisperClaims help? So in addition to the technological solutions that we provide, our customers, as part of their subscription, get access to our advice line support channels where they can ask any scheme or eligibility related questions. And we also host a customer-only WhatsApp group where useful conversations about R&D tax, the treatment of claims, submission issues and such like take place in real time. And members come together and offer help and advice. It's a very supportive space. We also offer a claim review service to our customers as well. So before they submit reports to HMRC, this just provides an optional layer of reassurance to help our customers feel confident that their claim has been double checked before submission. So lots and lots of really good stuff going on there. I can see we've got some questions coming in. So just before we get to the questions, I know that we've got quite a few of our customers actually on the webinar today. So just a heads up that we do have an event scheduled for the 22nd of August to demonstrate all of the new features that we're going to be implementing very shortly to comply with the additional information form. So look out for invites in your emails over the coming weeks. And for anybody who's on the call who's not a customer already and would like to hear more about how we're helping our customers through these challenging times, we do have a couple of options for you. On the 2nd of August, we're going to be hosting one of our monthly app showcase webinars where you'll get to see a demo of the app, find out a bit more about us and have the opportunity to ask questions. And alternatively, for anyone who's keen to have a one-to-one chat or a demo, I'm just about to pop some contact details and a link to the webinar that I've just mentioned as well in the chat box. So please do feel free to get in touch. That's it from me for the moment. Let me just quickly get that those messages in the chat box. And Jen, before I do that, let me just start you off with some of the questions. First one being, is it the same when you're submitting an amended return? So do you need to fill out an additional information form if it's an amended return that you're submitting?
So this is something I don't want to say for definite this hasn't been covered in the information that HMRC's put out, but I don't think it's been covered specifically. I would assume yes, that the process will remain the same. I wouldn't have thought you'll have an exception where if you're amending a CT600 that was submitted 3 months ago, you'll be able to get away with it. They're very, very clear that any claim being submitted post the 1st of August needs the additional information form. So I would assume that you've got no choice, you will have to do it. I would say it's probably better to take that belt and braces approach of just doing it rather than trying to get around it, if that makes sense. So yeah, based on all the information we have so far, as I say, these are the kind of questions that will be brought up next week at the R&D Consultative Forum with HMRC. But at the moment, I would assume that if you're submitting a CT600 that includes R&D, you will need to fill out the additional information form, whether it's an amended or a first-time return.
Super, thanks, Jen. So Leanne's asked, should the form currently be visible online? We tried to log in and couldn't find it.
It should. I think it has its own portal. So I know, again, I don't have an agent services account, but I know that when I log in, one way I get our PAYE, our VAT, all of that kind of thing. It's not there. It's in a different place. I don't know if, Suze, you can Google and find
Quickly trying to Google it
HMRC's
just
link.
now.
Yeah. Basically, there's a page on the government website which has all of this, and it has a link to the form. And so it isn't its own special place. It should be there, or it is there. We've been using it. It is live. You could potentially submit a claim right now. So it is definitely there. It's just not necessarily easy to find if you don't know where you're looking for it. But yeah, it's absolutely there. It's online and it's live.
Okay, I'll just have a quick look at that in the background. We've got another question. Where does the form show on the government gateway?
Yeah.
Maybe a similar question.
So again, it is in its own special little place, as far as I can tell. It's got its own link to it. So again, I don't think right now it would necessarily show up if you went in to do something to do with VAT or PAYE, for example.
Okay. Next one is regarding amended CT 600. So for a period of 30th of April 2022, where a return has been submitted, the additional information form needs to be submitted before the amendment is submitted. If this is after 31st of July 23, has there been any change to the 2-year amendment period?
So the first question, not 100% sure, but I would assume yes. So, if you've got something for a period to last April, the CT600 obviously submitted months ago, and you're submitting an amended one, I would absolutely assume that if you're doing this after 1st of August, then yes, you'll have to submit a form. There's been no change to the 2-year amendment period. So you can do it. You can still submit claims at the same time. There's another question later that impacts this a little bit, but in general, if it's a company that's been claiming for years and you tend not to submit it till quite a long time after the CT600, you still have your 2 years to do it. But you will need a form for amendment, I would have thought. I can't imagine HMRC leaving that huge loophole. So yeah, you will need to do a form for amended, but no changes to the 2 years.
Okay, next question is, can you basically just write a report and copy and paste that in?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, the thing I would say is, based on all the reports I've seen, all the reports I've written in my time of doing this, no one at the moment will be producing a report in the right format to be able to simply just copy and paste. You need to make sure you're covering everything they want, mostly around the way that they want the costs. So, for example, something that came to us like 6 weeks ago, where suddenly said this when you're waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. The way that you treat grants, for example, is going to be a bit more complicated because they want, if you've got a mixed claim, you've got some SME and some RDEC because of grants, and they're non-state aid grants, you're going to need to know which cost categories those grants were spent on, and then be able to take it off that cost category to be able to get the right figures for the way that they want it expressed. So there are differences. So yes, you can produce a report that you could then give to your client and then copy and paste into the form. But I would be very surprised if anyone right now is writing reports in a way that would make that absolutely straightforward and simple. So you're going to need to just adjust the way you write reports, probably, just to make sure that you're getting everything that you need.
Thanks, Jim. Next one is, how does this form relate to the new requirement for pre-notification? Is that a different process?
This is a great question, because we're getting asked this a lot. It is a completely different thing. So one of the reasons we've realized there is quite a lot of confusion in the R&D marketplace is that there's been a lot more publicity about the pre-notification form. And people have then assumed, when we started talking about the additional information form, that they are the same thing. They are absolutely not. So the pre-notification form is only required for claims starting on or after 1st of April 2023. And this is where you're required to tell HMRC you intend to claim R&D tax relief within 6 months of the end of the accounting period if the company hasn't claimed before or hasn't claimed in the last 3 years. So it's not going to affect a huge number of claims, and there will be almost none that are affected right now because it's only for claims starting, or claim period starting 1st of April. So very, very few of them will have got to the end of their financial year yet. So it's a totally different process. It's a totally different form. The pre-notification form, if you need it for these, if you're working with companies that have never claimed before, haven't claimed in a long time, is actually very, very simple. It asks a few questions about the company. It's got one box to fill in about the R&D they're doing, and then you just send it off to tell them. It is, again, very, very vital, and we will be putting more information out around that sort of towards the end of this year once we get through the additional information form, because it still is a way that will block companies from being able to claim. However, it's totally different process, and it's not what we're talking about today. So you've got your pre-notification form you need to be aware of for claims that have started this year. And we've got the additional information form, which is absolutely required for anything after the 1st of April, regardless of date.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Next one, will an R&D report still need to be submitted with the CT 600, or has the form taken the place of the report?
So this is one again where it's a bit ambiguous. So there was never, legally speaking, a need for you to send a report with the CT 600. It was best practice. It was absolutely good. The HMRC would quite often come back and say, you've put numbers and you haven't sent a report. Can we have some more information? But that was never a legally mandated thing. So the new form is the first time ever the HMRC have actually mandated some level of information to support an R&D form. What I would say is there's quite a lot missing from the additional information form. So for example, there's nothing in it that asks why you're claiming through the SME scheme, why you're claiming through the RDIC scheme, what grants you actually got, what value they had, anything like that. So, and a lot of that obviously will be, or all of that should be included in the report that you're producing. This question was asked at the last R&D consultative forum, and HMRC said, yeah, you can still send in a report if you want to. We think best practice wise, you absolutely should, because there are bits missing. It should hopefully deflect any questions HMRC might have about why is this company that looks large being able to claim as an SME, for example, or why is this SME claiming everything through RDIC? So it might be that over time, HMRC say they don't want anything attached to the CC 600 anymore, but at the moment, I think it's absolutely best practice to continue doing that, because, as I say, of the kind of missing information, the lack of almost nuance within the additional information form itself, the lack of context in some ways, the report should be still helpful.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Okay, does a PDF copy of the AIF need to be attached to the CT 600 submission?
No, that's not, HMRC have not asked for that. So what they are saying is you just need to submit, you need to tick a box to say you've submitted it in your CT 600, and you need to do the online submission. But at the moment, they haven't asked that you download it from one system and upload it into another. What systems they have at their end for matching up these forms with a CT 600, I don't know. It must be a massive, massive job on their side to even work out, you know, if this one was submitted at noon and this was submitted at 5 past, to work out that they were, you know, one was submitted ahead of the other, all of that. But that's kind of for them. But for now, they haven't asked that the PDF needs to be uploaded. I think if you're attaching anything to the CT 600, it's probably better that it is a report that contains more and richer information than you've already put into the additional information form.
Then thank you to whoever posted the link in the Q&A. I'm just posting it in the chat box for everyone else to be able to access as well. Another question, even if you have an agent services account for CTPOE, VAT, etc., do we have to make a separate account for the additional information form?
This is something that I'm not 100% sure of. So as I say, when people have asked this in our kind of community group, people have said basically try all of your agent services accounts and one of them should work. So it's probably worth trying the ones you have and see whether any of them will let you in. And it might be that you need additional information. It's quite ambiguous. So the link that is being linked to there does talk about this, but all it says is you need an agent services account. It doesn't say which one, and it doesn't say if you've already got these, you'll definitely be able to get in. So it's a bit of information that's missing. As far as we can tell, a lot of our accountant users who already had agent services accounts for corporation tax have been able to log in using those credentials. But the recommendation going around has been just keep trying, get them all out and just try them over and over again just to see which, if any of them will let you in.
Thanks, Jen. And another one here. Do you think that all of these processes will put companies off and therefore kind of go against the R&D ethos of promoting innovation?
It's a very political question as a final question. I do think taken alongside other things that HMRC have been doing, so the difficulties with inquiries, the level of inquiry, the way that they've been treating companies during inquiry, and then bringing in this as a new requirement, I definitely think it's going to be a bit of an interesting time for advisors to encourage and persuade companies that it is worth still claiming. There's going to be people that lose out. So small startup software companies, for example, who might do 20 projects in a year, but actually have only spent a very small amount on them. they're going to find it difficult to find an advisor to take them on if that advisor knows they're going to have to write up 10 projects in detail for a really small fee. Overall, obviously, the whole thrust of this for HMRC is to try and reduce. So they published their letters about the level of fraud and error. So they concluded that most of the problem with the R&D tax relief scheme is error, which I think anyone working this could have told you. But they're talking about it being in the SME scheme up to 25% of claims shouldn't have been submitted at all. So they are trying to reduce the number of claims and keep them to claims that should be legitimately put in, which I think anyone working in this space absolutely would encourage them to do that, and to to sort of clear out all of this kind of mess that goes in, and the claims for hairdressers and care homes and all those kind of things that should absolutely never been put in the first place. But I do think they are putting possibly too many barriers in place, especially for time poor, very innovative companies. They've reduced the amount they'll get back anyway. They've made it harder to claim. So I do think that there needs to be an adjustment back towards we're trying to encourage innovation, and here's how we're going to do that. But as Suze was saying all the way through, this shouldn't stop anyone who's been doing this properly in the first place. It's if you've produced your reports and you've been doing this thoroughly and you've been describing the right number of projects, that's probably the biggest change, is making sure you do up to 10 even for small claims. You should have 90% of the information by going through your current process. The form itself, if you have everything available, takes about 20 minutes to half an hour to fill out, depending on how many projects you're adding in. But if you're just copying and pasting across, you've got something that's, well formatted and you can just do that, it's not a huge burden. The other thing that some of the feedback we've had is that having this, the output that we're giving our clients means it can be handed to a junior staff member, because it's in the right order for the questions and you can pass it across. So there's ways to get around this. And as I say, for people who've been doing this well and robustly, it is an additional burden, but it shouldn't be a very big additional burden. It's another form, and it's making sure you describe enough projects.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So we've had the same link posted a few times, so thank you so much to everyone who's been sending that through. And Dan said that there should be no need to set up a different account if you follow the link that's in the Q&A, which has already been posted in the chat box as well. We do have a bit more time if anybody's got any additional questions. So just while I'm waiting to see if anybody has anything else that they'd like to ask, just to let you know that we will be sending out a recording of the webinar today by email to anyone who's registered and anyone who's joined today. So do look out for that if you maybe had to leave early or want to go back and review any of the information that we've given out today. That might be it from everyone. Anything else? No? Okay, well, that's all right then. We'll leave you all to get some lunch on this Tuesday lunchtime. Thank you everyone for joining us today, as always. Hopefully we've given you lots to think about. And if any questions do spring to mind regarding the session today, please do feel free to drop us a message at the hello@ email address that's posted on the screen in front of you, and please do feel free to download the resource that we have available for everyone, and get in touch if you'd like some additional help and advice, or like to find out how to become a WhisperClaims customer. Thank you so much. We will see you all very soon. Thanks, Jen.